What about other things apart
Mhm.
from this topic of
Yeah.
women in tech? What do you feel like is the next uh, technology that's gonna disrupt the industry?
I definitely feel like AI will disrupt it completely. And what I mean by that is that there is an AI bubble because we're all creating in that space. And the AI will burst just like
If you are about to start something new in AI or maybe any other technology with a fresh start, what would you do?
in the past 10 years of working with women in tech. One of the things that I came across was that all the women, most of them, I'd say about 70%, would graduate without the skills needed.
What a woman should do
Mhm.
if she is taking her first step and entering the market of technology?
My first step will always be
She doesn't talk about limit as something imposed. She talks about them as habits we quietly accept. Our guests keep holding that one belief. If you never tell yourself you can't, the question becomes how, not whether. From scaling portfolios to teaching systems, her focus isn't on proving capabilities, but on removing friction between education and work, learning and application, ambition and reality. Technology to her is a tool, not an answer. Today, our guest, Anie Akpe, the founder of Lumo Hubs and African Women in Technology, and this conversation asks what changes when learning is treated as non negotiable.
So, talking about founder, woman in tech, and someone who is being an influential person in this market. Apart from these keywords, what is any Akpe?
wow, such an interesting question because it puts you on a spotlight of like shamelessly talking about yourself. I consider myself that person that was thrown in an opportunity many, many years ago. And in that opportunity, I had to actually bring a portfolio from where it was at, 250 million. Um, in the long term, I brought it to like 1.2 billion. And I had to do that through creating efficiencies and processes. So it made me realize that in my activities and in the things that I had to create, I had to always think outside of the box. And what essentially that means is that it meant that I was a curious person. It meant that when opportunities came, I didn't look at it as like, wow, let me prove myself. I looked at it as what is the best that I can do? What's the easiest that I can do? And who can I impact? And then once I learned that, then the next thing was how do you teach more people what you learned because you made it work? And when I made it work, it made me realize that the impact is that you're able to give back. So, and that's what made me say it's important for me not only to learn how systems work, how to make it work for you as a human being who controls those outcomes. If I can teach it to myself, I definitely could teach it to others.
Definitely, definitely. And what was the thing that initially you thought you might not learn, but while following your path, you eventually learned to, you made sure that this is something that you have to learn to make sure you flourish your career in tech.
It's so funny. I've never looked at something as that I couldn't learn it. If I did think that way, I knew I wasn't going to. So I felt that because in my mind, I believed that whatever it is that I needed to do, I had to focus on only doing that. And I never gave myself the excuse of, oh, well, you are forgetful. Oh, you don't have this particular skill. I never put myself into that equation. I've always looked at it as I need to complete it. What is the best way for me to complete it? How or who do I need to talk to? So from those questions of hows, then it led me to you don't have time to think of yourself any less than. Your only thoughts can be, I can do it. I'll figure out a way.
Wonderful. And speaking about your core, you emphasize a lot and talk a lot about women in tech.
Yes.
First of all, I personally I'm not a fan of this topic
Mm-hmm.
because why do we have to emphasize that there
Mm-hmm.
is a woman in tech?
Yeah.
because there's no such topic as men in tech, right?
Exactly.
So it's
Right.
like a human in tech.
Right.
Either it should be a men or women, both, right?
Right.
So what's your take on this overall ecosystem of women in tech?
Well, I always find it interesting that men don't find the topic interesting because men are the topic. Um, and I believe that in technology, essentially, it was always created so that, in a sense, that men had the opportunity because they had more time allowance. And that time allowance is that you are the head of the household. And being the head of household, it meant that the hours could vary. And for women, those hours don't always vary. There's children, there's managing your household, and then there's managing yourself. I don't feel as if women have less of an opportunity. I think that women had to understand that there's a role you can play in it. And that role may not be someone who can work 12 hours a day because you have other responsibilities and obligation that you've created for yourself. It isn't necessarily always society. It's us. We choose to have children, you know?
Absolutely. I mean, there are
Right.
no less than men. They are actually superior, right? Because
Exactly.
they can do some things that men
Right.
cannot never do.
Exactly. And I'm a strong believer that yes, men can contribute to raising children in the household, but I'm traditionally, Nigerian in my belief system, where my mother was there to take care of me. And, I do believe that mothers can be there. They get assistance, but I do believe that the ownership of that is yours. With that being said, there is society which has changed, which doesn't give you the flexibility of just being at home anymore. So women now needed to know that within these careers, you were not always going to be working 100 hours a week. You could carve out your niche. And it isn't something that you could learn because remember, I don't believe there isn't anything we can't learn. So I believe that women needed to understand that you could work. There are positions that allow you that flexibility. There are jobs that will give you that flexibility. And women needed to understand you're not competing with men. It's not, we're fundamentally different. So there is no competition. What there is competition within yourself. And what that means for you is that you needed to learn what could accommodate you, your schedule, your hours, and your lifestyle. So when we say women in tech, it's for the women that have had to go through some of the same things I've gone through, or the women that have had 3 children at home and still needed to make that living and understand that there's a support system that says you can do it. It's just the encouragement, the motivation to let you understand that there are no roadblocks except what you put forth. And, you're not going to go talk to the man and say, not all women, some do. I have 3 kids. How are you doing it? Because some men do, but essentially, it has always been more traditionally women. So, with that said, then society is not giving us the comfort of being able to sit at home just because expenses as far reach, our ability for it to sometimes just be one person that brings in that income. So, with that said, then it's the support system that goes along with it. And that support system that says, hey, you're not overdoing it. You need to understand, yes, there's a balance, but what is that balance for you? Only you can structure it, but we can help you to understand that it's possible.
Absolutely. And what about other things apart
Hmm.
from this topic of
Yeah.
women in tech? What do you feel like is the next uh, technology that's gonna disrupt the industry?
Well, I've always felt like, well, first of all, every technology at some point we thought was going to, whether it was the internet or the newspaper or whatever the case may be, I definitely feel like AI will disrupt it completely. And what I mean by that is that there is an AI bubble because we're all creating in that space. And the AI will burst just like everything else bursted. But what it does when it bursts is it settles. And within that settlement, it doesn't mean anything went away. It just means that it gets rearranged. And in that rearrangement with AI, there's going to be more human component, but ultimately it eliminates a lot of jobs. And there are certain jobs that are eliminated now. Being a person that lives in the USA and as a USA citizen, most of the jobs right now, lots of layoffs in many sectors. And those layoffs will impact everyone because to a certain extent, it is computer, that's taking away some of those jobs. So we now understand that AI at its best is going to cost a certain amount of job, right?
They're gonna
So
create more as well.
It will create more in a sense of human intervention, because I believe that technology is not the answer. I believe technology is a tool, and that tool needs human influence. And in that human influence, we need to oversee things. But some people may not feel that way and may immediately go to hire more people than humans, and they will learn that cost ultimately. But that cost will come at a cost to people who need employment, right? But ultimately, what happens is it might have taken 10 people to run a business, and now with AI, it might only take three. But we all have to learn those processes and the nuances in order for us to establish the business of what we're running. Most startups can now start with just two people and be able to run it for a while before they need to add on more in the team. Again, it's about processes and what you establish and the workflows you establish. So I strongly believe that AI will completely disrupt the industry in terms of who's getting hired and where they're getting hired.
And if you are about to start something new in AI or maybe any other technology with a fresh start, what would you do?
I actually have started something new, which is Lumo Hubs. As a person that was focusing on women in tech, I understood nuances, as I mentioned, of going into an industry where you thought you didn't know, but you were forced to learn. And because you were, then you were able to see where the deficiencies were. In the past 10 years of working with women in tech, one of the things that I came across was that all the women, most of them, I'd say about 70%, would graduate without the skills needed in order to land a role. And the only roles that had an established parameters where they would hire you without any experience was a banking role, where they have a 24-month management training program that's already established. But a lot of corporations aren't set up that way. So when students graduate, they don't have an opportunity to go and say, let me learn this skill. You're not. If someone takes you in, you're going in very, very, very entry level. Um, so with Lumo Hubs, what we've done is we partner with universities. Essentially, we'll be using AI to mentor them. But what we're teaching them is on systems that's already being used by corporations. Say, for example, Salesforce. Salesforce is a popular marketing tool. It allows you to do partnerships as well, tracking. So students don't know that system. It's not being taught in academics because it is not a system, it's academics.
Absolutely.
So there's also social media content management. Even though we know that AI can do that, still need a human to overlook, still need a human to make sure the tone matches with your organization.
Yes.
We teach students that, we teach them the metrics, we teach them how to understand what makes a company go viral, what information you put out. So when the students essentially are getting ready to graduate, they would have created a portfolio. AI will mentor them in terms of like your basics, but we still have human facilitators who will overlook the work to make sure that the students have a full grasp of it, right? These classes are only for maybe 6 weeks tops. But what they do is they introduce students to the real world and real world applications. When they're finished with their portfolios, we would create an AI talent system that allows any corporation to go in and post for any position. And the top three candidates with the portfolio, the corporations will have an opportunity to review it and then hire from there. So essentially, I believe that AI can be used in education. I don't believe that AI replaces teachers. I do believe that AI, in conjunction with teachers, overseeing to make sure things were done correctly and not 100% AI, that's where you meet. And with that being said, Luma Hubs is what we're working on to facilitate work with the universities. Apart from AI, there are roles that will always be available, and such as plumbing, electrical, woodwork. Right? We know robotics is coming,
Yes.
but ultimately, there's the human factor of being able to create things that we all treasure, the creativity and the uniqueness. Right? With Lumo Hubs, we will have hub centers that allows you to still learn those vocational skill sets so that maybe tech isn't your thing. However, you will now have an opportunity to be able to learn those other skill sets, which brings you in as an apprentice. So, learning from the women and seeing where the skills gaps were, what was being impactful to them and why they couldn't learn certain roles, that's where Lumo Hubs comes in. It allows us to teach all students. And then also the community can join. So it was a lesson we had to learn from the women.
Wonderful, wonderful. I mean, you gave a very elaborated uh, answer to the women in tech and also how people should learn.
Hmm.
Let's bring out the crux and the essence of what a woman should do if
Hmm.
she is taking her first step and entering the market of technology.
Right. My first step will always be never set limits for yourself. Never look at something and say, well, maybe I'll do this, or maybe I can't, or maybe there's no babies. Just pick one and start, and start in somewhere you're most comfortable, but you start. Anytime you set a limit for yourself, that is the limit. That's as far as you're going to go. You have to remain open enough to understand that education comes in so many different factors. Again, I have to reiterate my upbringing. Being Nigerian, we don't get the luxury of not understanding that education is the key in this world. So, and we also understand that continuing education only extends that for you. So, with that being said, we all have to remember we're constant learners in this life. You will always learn something. But if you set limits to what you're supposed to learn, you'll never get there.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Annie, for this amazing session over here and the insights that you gave. And would love to see you again.
I'd love to be here. Thank you so much for
Thank you
having
so
me.
much.
All right.